Take me into your loving arms. Kiss me under the light of 1,000 stars. Place your head on my beating heart. I'm thinking out loud. Maybe we found love right where we are.
The next morning I found myself being woken up by sounds coming from nearby. Adjusting my eyes, I spotted Toru sitting in the armchair next to the couch, watching me like I was the most fascinating thing in the world as he waited patiently. "You really are excited, aren't you?" I asked him with a chuckle. He nodded continuously in response. I couldn't be upset with him for waking me up. He looked like the most huggable thing in the world. His tinted rosy cheeks, his bright stare. He sat legs crossed in the chair. "Since we're both awake, I suppose we can head out early," I proposed, and from the innocent smile that grew on his face I'm sure that's exactly what he was hoping for. "I have to get ready first though. I'm not going out in just my sweatpants," I told him as I lifted myself from the couch. After using the bathroom I got dressed and quickly brushed my hair. Today was the day. I'm going to do it. Mom was in the kitchen preparing breakfast. She came out and offered to make us something for our day out, but I figured we'd just eat something while we're there. "That's all right, we'll probably just pick up something while we're out." She looked a little disappointed, but to be honest this was more convenient for everyone. Though knowing her, she probably just wants to cook us something. "Well, if you're sure then," she said, raising her brows. "I'm sure," I said, giving her a smile. "All right, well I guess I'll be in the kitchen finishing up breakfast for the other two then," she said, walking off. "You ready?" I asked, snapping his attention away from my mom. "Yeah. Let's head out then," I said, grabbing my keys. We said our byes to my mom and dad before walking out the door. Kaido was nowhere to be seen, so I assumed he was still asleep. That's probably for the best though. I can just imagine him trying to weasel his way onto our day out. Just as I got to the car I noticed Toru in awe as he made his way over in a daze. He seemed to be taking in the morning air. I hadn't even noticed it until I saw him inhaling. "The air is much nicer here than back home." "Like it?" I asked with a small laugh. "Love it," he responded back with a smile. After settling into the car I started the engine and pulled out of the driveway. The rising sun casted soft shadows over most of the neighborhood as it rose from behind the mountains. The zoo won't be open for another couple of hours, so we have some time to kill. I knew this beforehand, I just wanted to spend more time with him. "Have any suggestions?" "No, anything's fine with me," he replied happily. I paused, thinking where the best place to go would be. "Wanna go to the arcade or something?" I asked, glancing at him. I could see his facial expression shift. His smile faltered. "Or not," I quickly added, hoping I didn't upset him. I wondered why he was suddenly looking uneasy though. "And no, it's fine. I was just remembering how Elaine would take me there whenever we hung out. I remember feeling like my life was finally turning around, that I finally had someone I could relate to so closely. It was amazing. That was one of the happiest moments of my life." Then she made it clear that was all an act, that she actually wanted nothing to do with me. He explained with his small voice cracking. "Well, I'll make sure our time there is even better, and it'll actually be real. So instead of thinking about the times you had with Elaine, you can remember ours instead." That innocent smile made its way onto his face again as I finished my sentence. Just when we reached the street where the arcade was located, we unbuckled our seatbelts and exited the car. We were greeted by a gust of warm wind, despite it still being so early in the day. There were very few faces roaming the streets, so it was easy to tell that most people were still in bed. I walked over to the door and held it open for Toru. He smiled and thanked me before walking in. We entered the arcade, greeted by a perky lady behind the desk. She was very helpful when we went up to buy our tickets. I made sure I was the one paying. I wanted Toru to have a great time without having to worry about a single dime. "Any games you want to play first?" His eyes scaled the room for a moment, silently choosing between the various options. "That one?" He pointed over to one of those small basketball games where you shoot the balls into the holes. "All right, think you can beat me? I'm pretty good at sports." I challenged him. "I'm going to try," he said, determined. He walked over and took a deep breath. My eyes were on him, mouth in a smirk, as we waited for the timer to count down. I turned my attention back to the game as the timer hit 0. While he tossed one ball at a time, I took the 2-ball route, using both my hands. His aim wasn't all that great, though he still managed to score from time to time. Not to brag or anything, but I had 3 times as much as him. When he noticed, he gave me the craziest look. I chuckled in response, making him pout. 10 seconds were left on the clock and I had 7 times as much as him. I was at 35 points to be precise. Toru suddenly lunged at me, knocking the balls from my hands. He made sure I didn't score another point. Every time I'd go back to pick up another, he'd push it off to the side. He continued blocking me as the time counted down. I wrapped my arms around his small frame, sending him into a fit of giggles. Just before the game ended, I released one of my hands, grabbed the ball and scored one final point, putting me at 36. I expected him to be upset with me, but he was actually surprised, impressed even. "Show off," he scoffed as he turned to me and jokingly scowled. "Hey, we're just getting started, I'm sure we'll find something you're good at," I assured him with a pat on the back. Before heading on to find our next game, I collected my tickets. I wanted to snag something nice for Toru before we headed off to the zoo. The next game we played was Punchermania or something dumb like that. There are 2 punching bags for 2 different players. Whichever one is hit the hardest during a match will take the win. It boggles my mind as to why Toru chose to play this one. I raised a brow at him, and he knew exactly why, but instead of explaining himself, he slipped into a boxer stance, bouncing in place, and he did all of this with a straight face. I just laughed at his goofiness and got into form after putting on my boxing gloves. I wasn't gonna go easy on him, though that's only because I needed as many tickets as I could get, so that I'd be able to get him that prize I mentioned. Just as the machine signaled us to go, we let out our strongest punches. Despite having protection on my hand, I heard a snap in the machine that the punching bag was connected to. I looked over to Toru to see him place a hand to his mouth, still wearing the oversized boxing gloves. We both went silent for a moment before breaking out into hysterical laughter. I noticed a few workers looking our way, probably wondering if we were high or something of the sort. I didn't mind it though, I actually found that it made the situation even more humorous. After finally catching my breath, I looked up to see our scores. Toru's was 12.4, and mine was 56.1. The ticket dispenser printed out a crap ton of tickets. I'd surely have enough to get something good, but I wasn't done yet. We continued playing games, running back and forth around the building. We played mini golf. I won that. We played tabletop football. I won that. We played some racing games on an unnecessarily large arcade machine. I won that. We also played some dancing games where we had to step on the correct pads underneath us in time to the music. Toru won that. The excitement of his first victory was adorable. The smile that split across his face as he struggled to catch his breath, all of it was just so cute. I collected a record amount of tickets, or at least that's what the lady at the desk told me as we were checking out. The staff here seemed to be quite upset with us. I don't know whether it was from us getting so many prizes with so little effort, or our loud and hyperactive presence. Half the time we were there I was chasing Toru around for interrupting my games, even though I still won most of them. He thought he could get away with it, but he was wrong. I tackled him to the floor and tickled him until he begged for mercy. After finishing up at the arcade, we left the building with all of our prizes in hand. The sun was now full gear, brightening up all of the buildings and streets. It made me wonder how long we spent there. We ran out to the car and stashed away all of our prizes in the back. I snagged a giant elephant, a muscle figure, a monkey, a variety of balls, and a couple of video games. All of this stuff was heavy as shit despite being stuffed toys and small figures. Toru got a very small charm. I expected him to get something small with the amount of tickets he won, but what I didn't expect was him to give it to me. He told me he wanted me to have it, and I graciously accepted. I felt kind of bad for being so competitive, but in the end, all of the stuff I won was really for Toru. Somehow his gift to me felt more special. That was amazing. Toru managed in between his worn breaths. Yeah, wasn't expecting to have to chase you around the entire time. I chuckled, also a little worn. Sorry about that. I couldn't help myself, it was too much fun. He said with the brightest smile as he looked over to me. I guess I accomplished my mission. I replied, with Toru's contagious smile making its way onto my face. Dang, how did it get so late? The zoo was open for a half an hour already. I uttered to myself, shuffling around in my seat, searching for the keys. We have all day to get to the zoo. I really enjoyed being here, so I'm glad we're late. Toru said, looking out to the arcade through the window of the car. I felt like I just won the lottery knowing Toru was having a good time. I didn't want to bring him out here just to end up bored in the end. After finding my keys, I started the car and headed for the local zoo. The ride there was nice, and it seemed Toru enjoyed it more than I did. His eyes lit up like they were holding the sun's light behind them. A smile was always present on his face whenever I'd glance over at him. The zoo finally came into view after a half-hour-long drive. The parking lots were already filling up. Several families were heading inside. Boys, girls, men, women, you name it. I didn't hesitate to find a parking space due to them being in high demand. Toru was practically out the door before the car even came to a full stop. I would have scolded him for being so reckless, but I didn't want to upset him, or break his spirit. He bounced in place, eagerly awaiting my arrival to his side. Before I had a chance to utter a single word, he took hold of my hand, wrapping his own small one around my large one. He pulled me with him as he excitedly rushed to the entrance of the large park filled with animals and forest life. Whoa, slow down, dude. I chuckled with a little worry eating at me. I can't believe I'm finally going to the zoo. He cheered, not paying attention to what I said. It's been a while since I've been to one. From what I remember, the last one wasn't all that great, but I still had a blast. He beamed after turning to face me. I know you're excited, but let's try to be a little more careful. I told him, hoping to convince him to be more careful. Yeah. I think that's probably a good idea. Toru agreed after almost knocking someone over. It was really cute seeing him this way though. The usually calm and timid Toru now running around cheerfully in glee. You know how people express the feeling of having butterflies, that's exactly how I was feeling at this moment. Feeling the warmth of his soft hand wrapped around mine, the bright smile running across his face, it truly was bliss. Excuse me, passes please. One of the staff at the reception table called out as we entered the room. Oh, I'd like to buy passes for two. I said before digging through my pockets for my wallet. $80 for two. Toru's eyes shot up at me and stayed there looking like I was crazy. I'd like premium passes please. I said, placing $130 on the table. Here you are. The man said, handing me the tickets wearing a bright smile. Enjoy your day. I noticed how uneasy and worried Toru looked all of a sudden as we made our way to the entrance. Is something wrong? I asked, looking at his willowing self. Was it really okay to spend all that money on the zoo? I mean, I'm the one who really wanted to come after all. He asked in a small, quiet voice. Little did he know no amount of money would ever be too much so long as it made him happy. Don't worry your little head about it, man. I said, ruffling a hand through his hair. He squinted an eye, and smiled back at me. This was well worth it, trust me. I said, placing a hand on his back and guiding him through the entrance. We were blinded by the bright light of the sun that landed on us as we passed through the entrance. Toru's eyes shone 2 times brighter than that when his eyes landed on the side of some animals roaming around behind the fenced-off fields. He grabbed my hand and ran towards the closest exhibit. This one happened to contain zebras. Toru asked one of the nearby workers if it was okay to pet them. She said as long as he doesn't cross the fence everything should be fine. Toru ran back over to the fence and reached his arm out, but the zebra was too far away. Toru continued to try, hoping it would move an inch closer. I decided to give him a hand. I made my way to his side and wrapped my hands around his hips. His head shot in my direction, face flushed with curiosity strung in his eyes. I nudged my head towards the zebras. Want some help? I can lift ya. His innocent smile returned and he nodded happily, returning his gaze to the animals in front of him. This dude was as light as a feather, so I had no problem lifting him. The expression on his face when his hand finally connected with the snout of the animal, it was something I'll always remember. The sad kid who wanted to end his painful and unfair life not too long ago was now lit up like a candle's flame at night. It made me happy and cheerful seeing him like this. It's so soft. He stated under his breath. Here, you try. He turned to me and grabbed my hand once again. He guided it to the snout of the zebra he'd just previously been petting. I let out a small laugh as my fingers landed on the wet, slimy nose of the animal. We continued petting the zebras, but it wasn't too long until Toru's attention was drawn by something else. Can we go there next? he asked, pointing towards a poster pointing in the direction of the monkey exhibit. All right, sure, let's go. He cheered and made his way over to the sign with me following behind. So far our day was going great, better than expected even. Today is the day. I'm going to do it. When Toru saw the monkeys hopping just behind the glass, his face lit up just as much as it had with the zebras. This time he wasn't allowed to pet them though. That was probably for the best. Monkeys are unpredictable. The little girl of the family that was beside us also had the same expression as Toru. It made me realize how much of a kid he still was. A lot of his childhood was taken from him by his family, and it's as if his emotions lay dormant, like he locked himself away from the world. The more I get to know him, the more I see his true self. He's a cheerful, caring, energetic dude. He's been through so much, he deserves this happiness, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. We continued going from exhibit to exhibit. We saw dolphins, sea lions, turtles, giraffes, and several other animals. He named several of them. Stella, Jack, Big Head, Bobby, Johnny, Long Nose, and many others, but the most prominent name was Iwa-chan. I think he's just doing it to tease me at this point though. Even after all of the exhibits we went to, we still hadn't found the penguins. Just as we were heading over to the exhibit board to find their location, my cursed stomach had to go and growl. To be honest, I'd actually forgotten about breakfast, and it's already time for lunch. I was having too much fun to even notice how hungry I actually was. I didn't want to stop us from seeing the penguins though, we'd already been searching for them for a long time. Toru didn't mind, but I still felt bad delaying the guy's reunion with his little penguins. Toru smiled at me upon hearing my stomach's call for food. I can buy us lunch, he offered, but there was no way I was going to accept that. No, I'll buy us lunch. Today I was paying for everything. Despite how stubborn he can be sometimes, he knew that I wouldn't change my mind. He broke a little half smile before speaking. Are there any places to eat around here? I actually don't know, I replied before scanning the nearby area, hoping to find something even though I knew it wasn't likely. Excuse me, are you looking for the cafe? One of the workers asked, walking up to us. There's a cafe here? I asked with a curious expression. I don't remember seeing anything about that when looking this place up. Yeah, it's 2 halls down and on the left. You should be able to spot it pretty easily, she explained. We thanked her before following her directions. We reached the cafe and like the woman said, it was hard to miss. It was both an indoor and outdoor cafe. Toru looked taken back by the well-designed interior. It wasn't anything special to me, but he scooped it out like it was a pure work of art. While Toru was off in a daze, I went up to the counter and began ordering. What can I get for you? A small teenage girl asked from behind the oaken counter. I quickly glanced over the list and decided what I wanted. I'd like a sloppy joe and a plate of chicken rice. Anything else? She asked while writing my order down. Yeah, hold on a sec, I told her before calling out to Toru. His gaze snapped from the room to me before coming over. What are you getting? Oh, He looked over the sign for a moment, trying to decide what to get. Knowing him, he was probably going to go with something cheap. And don't hold back just because I'm paying, I quickly added, in a stern voice. A small smile flashed onto his face for a second, almost confirming his intentions. I'd like a tuna sandwich and a salad please, he said, his voice soft and timid. I realized how similar our orders were to the ones we made during our school trip. I found it odd that I didn't order more fish-based meals, seeing as how sushi is my favorite thing to eat. That'll be $20.95 for standard passes or completely free if you have a premium pass. Oh look, I've already got us covered, I smirked at Toru. We have premium passes, I confirmed, taking mine out to show her. All right, coming up. Your orders should arrive shortly, the girl said before handing the slip of paper to a chef in the back. While waiting for our orders, we went over to the drink dispenser to buy a couple drinks. Toru, which one do you want? I asked, pointing at the choices. Lemonade, he said with a suspicious smile. I figured that's what he would get. Just as I was about to insert the money, Toru quickly inserted his and tapped the lemonade button twice, ordering for both of us. Before I even realized what happened, he was staring at me with a huge grin of satisfaction on his face. Why you? Before he could do anything, I caged him in my arms. He squirmed around, trying to worm his way free. He knew what was coming, but I wasn't going to let him off that easily. I continuously tickled him until we'd drawn too much attention to ourselves. Toru slumped over on my chest and laughed, exhaustedly. After Toru caught his breath, we grabbed the drinks from the dispenser and took a seat in the corner of the room, waiting for our orders. A tuna sandwich, salad, sloppy joe, and chicken rice. The girl called out, setting our orders on the counter. "That's us," I said as I walked up to the counter. "Enjoy your meal," she said in a peppy tone. We thanked her and collected the plates before looking for a table. The cafe is split into two sections, one being indoors and the other out. To our surprise, the indoor section was just about packed, so instead we carried our food outside. It looked just as cozy as the indoor section in my opinion. The view was great as well. A large portion of the town was visible. The warm summer breeze made it even better. Toru took a seat at a table near the wooden railing surrounding the outdoor section. I followed behind him and set all of the food down. The smell of it tempted me to just bite into it right there while I was standing, but I restrained myself. "This is really nice," Toru said, staring off into the distance. "It is. But I'm just here for the food." I laughed before taking a large bite out of my sandwich. He pouted at me before doing the same, except his bite was small. We continued eating in a comfortable silence, until I stole a bite out of his sandwich. You know I wasn't going to eat without taking at least one bite out of Toru's food. He smiled with his mouth still full of food. "I get to try yours," he demanded after he finished swallowing. For some reason it made me happy that Toru was comfortable eating between us. "Sure," I said with a casual shrug. "Knock yourself out." I pushed my food to his side of the table and watched him as he ate. The way he slowly went through everything was cute, but then again I find everything he does cute. I knew Toru wasn't going to be able to finish all of that food himself, so I ate whatever was left. The only thing he actually did manage to finish was his salad. I finished up the rice and took the sandwiches with me. We returned to our penguin hunt. We reached the exhibit board and scanned over the list of animals and their numbers. We missed the penguins on our way to the sea lions the first time around. We knew exactly where to go now though. "Race you there," I challenged him, wearing a smirk. "Come on man, you know you'll win." "That didn't stop you from taking me on at the arcade now, did it?" "Fine, if I win you'll have to do whatever I say for a week." He negotiated after pondering for a moment. "All right," I agreed, still wearing my smirk. "Don't blame me if I puke up lunch," Toru mumbled under his breath while preparing himself. "Ready? Go." Toru had already begun running before I said go. I chased after him, running down the long hallway. I passed him in no time flat. I heard a whine echo behind me as I distanced myself from him. I looked back at him with a smirk, still running at full speed. That was until I crashed into something. I looked up, rubbing my aching head to notice a pile of paper spread across the floor. "You youngsters nowadays." The older woman standing above me sighed angrily. "Oh shit, I'm really sorry," I swore, realizing what I'd done. I didn't waste any time gathering the scattered paper. Toru caught up to me, but instead of passing me he knelt down to help. He did take off before we were finished though, so I'd have to get payback for that. "Next time watch where you're going." "I'm really sorry about this," I repeated before taking off after Toru. I had no intention of letting him win. After catching up with him once again I could tell how hard he was trying. It made me feel like a jerk, but there was something I wanted out of this. I tailed Toru closely. I would have passed him earlier, but he extended his arms, blocking the way. After a moment of prep I ducked under his arm and ran past, taking the lead once again. The frown that appeared on his face almost broke my heart in two. We were very close to the exhibit too, which really must have been disappointing for him. "Hey, I'll make it up to you later dude." I waved at him before taking a sharp left turn. The door to the penguin exhibit was now in full view. "I made it," I said, taking a deep breath. I heard footsteps approaching. They belonged to Toru. He still looked pretty down. "I win." I'm sure we both realized that. He bit back, still out of breath. "You know what this means?" He raised an eyebrow. "You have to do whatever I say for a week." "Hey, what?" "That wasn't part of the deal," he said, his voice going shaky. "Says who?" I narrowed my eyes at him. Me. You can't say that after the fact. The race is already over." I chuckled, knowing full well that Toru had no intention of letting me command him if I won, but I still wanted the prize. But. He went quiet. Come on, let's go. The penguins are just behind this door. He lifted his head and his excitement resurfaced. Yeah, let's go, he said cheerfully, almost as if forgetting everything that happened. I shook my head. Just as I was about to rest a hand on his back and guide him through the door, he grabbed it and pulled me into the exhibit room. We were greeted by a bright tint of blue filling the room. Toru's pace slowed as the penguins came into view. They were separated from the room by a sheet of glass, almost like an aquarium, except behind the glass was a large open area with rocks, a pretty big pond and waterfalls streaming down the miniature mountains. Toru walked up to the glass and watched them silently. I was dying to know what was on his mind. His expression was unreadable. It wasn't until around 5 minutes later that I was able to tell that his face was overwhelmed in satisfaction and joy. I watched the penguins alongside him without uttering a word. Mainly cause I didn't want to distract him. He was looking at them so intently. The penguins waddle around in their pen, climbing the miniature mountains to hop in the pond below. If I found that adorable, I can't imagine what Toru was feeling. I want to pet them, he whispered. I couldn't hold back a laugh. I don't think that's allowed, I said to him, and that was the first time he pulled his eyes away from the pen ever since we got here, which was around 10 minutes ago or so. Are you sure? He asked, still holding a hopeful look in his eyes. Hold on, I'll be right back. An idea popped into my head. I knew Toru wouldn't move from that position, so I left to go speak with one of the staff. Hey, is petting these guys off limits here? I asked a nearby worker. Well, there isn't really any way to pet them. I'm not sure if you've already seen it, but there does happen to be a feeding station right through that door over there on the left, he informed, pointing to the location. All right, thank you, I said before returning to Toru's side. Like I figured, he hadn't moved a single inch from the glass. It was almost as if he was glued to it. Hey, Toru, I called, drawing his attention. He turned to stare at me, silently. His cheeks were flushed a bright tint of pink. He continued on with his silence and waited for me to speak. Sadly, I don't think they allow petting here, but that dude over there just told me there's a feeding area over there, I told him, nudging my head to the doorway. His head immediately sprung in that direction, scanning for it. Before I'd even noticed, Toru was already halfway across the room. Come on, he yelled out, waving me over as he continued to run towards it. We walked up a small set of stairs and emerged into the sunlight. The feeding station was much more advanced than I was expecting. The whole area was outdoors with the edges fenced off. There were a few pails full of small fish lined up along the side of the fence. 2 of them were occupied, leaving one available, luckily. Toru wasted no time finding a spot. He tossed the small fish onto the ground and watched as the penguins came and gobbled them up. I was having just as much fun watching Toru as he was the penguins. His reactions were so charming and adorable. He'd smile while watching them waddle around and giggle when they'd splash in the pond. The urge to kiss him was arising once again, but I had to hold off, at least for now. I took a seat next to Toru near the edge of the feeding station. We talked for a while he fed the penguins. He talked about how as a kid he'd goof around and pretend to be different animals whenever his grandparents came over to visit. He told me about the large collection of animal books he used to have before he moved here and how his closet was full of animal prints and patterns. He told me how much he used to love animals, especially penguins. He thought he moved on, but he hasn't, which I think is a good thing. It's charming knowing how much he cares for animal life, and just life in general. It's heartbreaking to think that he was ready to take his own life. It was a while before I could pull Toru away from the penguins. We spent at least an hour in that one exhibit. And the only reason he let me pull him away was cause I promised we'd come back sometime. We checked out a couple more exhibits before finishing up our tour of the zoo. By that time it was already evening. The orange tint of the sky covered the town, making it look like a painting or an image from one of those postcards my sister would bring home. Speaking of her, she was supposed to come home to visit a while ago. She's always late though, so there's no surprise there. I don't want to go back yet, Toru said to me as we walked over to my car. Have something in mind? I asked, raising a brow. Well, and no, he said, his voice going quiet. It seemed as if his timidness was resurfacing now that we were out of the zoo. Here, let's take a walk around the town, I said, stuffing all of the excess stuff we got from the zoo into my car. I decided to take advantage of the lighting and see the town in its glory. It was a good way to cool down after a long day. It's something I did a lot back home in my neighborhood. I always found that I ended up in the park alone. It was a good way to escape all of my annoying friends and family. After meeting Toru though, I've become more patient and tolerant towards them. Okay. He replied with a soft smile. I shut the car door and started down the pavement with Toru walking beside me. This is really pretty, Toru said, beaming across the street. It reminds me of those evenings during our school trip. I nodded, taking in the scene. Yeah. It really does, he replied, his voice still quiet. We continued walking through the town for a period of time until we reached a small sloped bridge leading to a park. Toru went ahead of me and stood on the bridge. The moment I set foot on it, the streetlights came on, making the setting even more majestic. Whoa! Toru whispered as he gazed out to the open orange sky. When I reached his side, he turned to look at me with the same expression, sending a smile across my lips. This is amazing, he said in awe. The scene was perfect. The warm summer breeze, the deep orange sky, the sound of the water running beneath the bridge, and the streetlights illuminating it all, not to mention Toru was here, beside me. Thanks for today. It's been so long since I've been to a zoo, so I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun today. I truly felt like myself for the first time in forever. I know I can be a little clingy and not respect people's personal space at times, so I want to apologize if I made you uncomfortable. I was just so excited, he said softly, like a gentle breeze. That was it, now was the time. I've held off long enough. I don't want him to be upset with me for doing something so selfish, but I can't hold off any longer. But thanks again. I don't know how this day cow. I interrupted him, placing two of my fingers under his chin and lifting his head to mine. A heavy breeze washed past us as our lips connected. His were so soft, softer than I imagined them to be. The feeling of them pressed against mine was the greatest and most satisfying feeling in the world. I felt lightning coursing through my body with shivers up my spine. I pulled him closer with my free hand and deepened our kiss. This wasn't my first kiss, but it was something so special and new that it might as well have been. The kiss lasted for a long minute, with neither of us pulling away. Toru's hand grasped at my shirt as he rested it against my stomach. Our hair was a mess after the wind had passed. I pulled away to see Toru's face. His cheeks were a deep red, his eyes wide open, and his lips still parted. He took a couple steps backwards and continued to stare at me in complete silence. I did the same, not knowing what to say. Toru stood there, looking as if he wanted to say something, but nothing would come out. My heart rate increased the more I came to realize what I'd just done. I was hoping I didn't upset him. Maybe he wasn't ready? Sorry. I paused, trying to form words in my stirred mind. Is this a joke, or do you? Toru said, shifting his sight to the bridge below him. No. It wasn't a joke. He looked up from the ground, directly into my eyes. So, you do, like me. He stuttered, making it easy to tell how nervous he was. More than you could ever imagine. His cheeks lit up and his eyes shifted to the right, breaking our gaze. Why? Why did you wait so long if you knew? If you knew I liked you back? There were a lot of reasons, I guess. The biggest one being that I didn't think you were ready for me to drop all of my feelings out there while you were going through so much. Especially since I was one of the causes. I didn't want to remind him about all of that, but it was the only way to give him an honest answer. That's the reason I acted the way I did when Elaine told me all of the things you supposedly did. I liked you a lot, and not only as a friend, so it broke my heart when I thought all of the time we spent together was a lie. Toru's eyes returned to mine, wearing a look of surprise. Hanging out with you every day during the trip made me realize how much I actually liked you. I admitted as a half smile crossed my face. I'm still sorry I didn't believe you though. I let my emotions get the better of me. Suddenly I felt a pair of small arms wrap around me. I forgive you, Toru said, capturing me in a hug. The ride back home was nothing but silence, other than the engine of the car and the tires on the road. I glanced over at Toru a couple of times and noticed he was staring out the window with a smile on his face. By the time we arrived back at my place, he'd fallen asleep. Can't blame him, using all of that energy throughout most of the day. It's getting pretty late anyway. Kaido called my phone earlier, telling me they were about to eat dinner and that I should hurry home if I wanted to make it on time. Toru and I stayed out a little longer than expected though, so I'm sure they've already finished up by now. Yo Toru, wake up, I whispered, ruffling his hair. His eyes snapped open much quicker than I expected. We're home? he asked in a sleepy voice, rubbing his eyes. Yeah, I can carry you in if you want. He pouted at me. No, I can walk. With that we both got out.